Yeah, it was why we're doing the podcast.
Yeah.
We've had your brother Michael on, and
Yeah.
and it's the same thing. And I think this is why we've started it, right? Because people might think when Darren's all armored up in his football gear and a helmet that he's immortal and doesn't have a heart and emotions and struggles and like all of those things. And so when we have guests like yourself, like Darren, like Michael, we can bankrupt that story for that one person that might be sitting there right now listening and think that their problems are unique or that they're different. It's like, no, because I was telling myself the same thing at my rock bottom. And the truth was, there were plenty of people that can relate exactly to what I was going through, and they found a way out. But I was
Mhm.
telling myself, doctor screwed me over, everybody's out to get me, and so this is the
The
importance, the stories that we tell
the
ourselves.
stories, right? I shared this recently. It's like feelings exist, like those feelings are last in our body for 60 to 90 seconds. Like the actual feeling, the anger, the sadness, the love, the joy, whatever. And it's the story that we tell ourselves over and over again in our mind about that emotion that keeps us stuck in it.
Mm.
And
Right.
that's so true. That's so true.
I want to talk a ton about just where you're at now and the coaching that you're doing specifically to women. And the truth is, like, you can be a coach and you can send a message to women, but I believe that same message, men can hear that same message. If we're talking
100%.
about speaking our voice or losing our voice or having our emotion or feeling our emotions, like, this is for everybody. But I really want to dive into some of the stuff that you do that maybe we can give our listeners some applicable tools going into the holidays, because Darren and I have committed to kind of just stepping up and bringing guests on that can actually give tools and integrate some of these tools into the challenges. We just passed Thanksgiving. I mean, it's it's portrayed as these holidays with like all these amazing things that happen, but it's so challenging for so many people, including myself. And so we want to arm our guests with tools.
Okay, so the best advice I've ever given or thing I love. Have you heard about Bob Proctor? Change Your Paradigm, Change Your Life. It's one of the
Mm.
best books I've ever read, and I've listened to it on Audible over 10 times. Every once in a while, I'll pop it on, kind of like a 12-step meeting, and kind of because I get something different because I'm in a different space, so I hear it differently. But something that we've learned, right, is that paradigm of like, you should be around family, you have to do this, like, it doesn't matter, their blood. And it's like, if it's detrimental to your mental, emotional well being, like, we don't have to do anything. But that's really hard. And it's kind of like getting sober. It's like doing that first thing for the first time. And something that I've been working with a lot of people on recently are those boundaries. Because for me, right? Because for me, it was like, it felt like if I say, this is what I need, and like keeping it to me, like, not, you need to do this, like, I need to leave at, this isn't really 8 o'clock. I need to leave at 8 o'clock because that's my bedtime. And then people saying like, well, just stay another light, like, just do this, just do this. It's like, no, this is what I need for me. So I feel better. So I'm a better human. And they start giving pushback. And it's really hard the first time, because it's like, I'm going to do what I need to do for me. And then you get to choose how you feel about those boundaries that I'm putting up for myself. But that's hard because as someone that's a self-sacrificer, a people pleaser, all of those things that came along, that's why I drank, to try to
Yeah.
figure out how I can fit in. Um, but something that, I've talked about a lot recently is that I was never wrong. Like, our voices, like, my voice is never wrong. Like, my voice, my intuition. But for so long, I buried it in alcoholism, a toxic marriage. And what I found is I'm just in the wrong rooms. Right. And so what it took for me, and I use this analogy of like walking down a hallway and you see all these doors and you kind of walked out of the wrong room and you're on this long hallway and there are all these open doors and you're like, I don't know which one's for me. Right. Like, I don't know, what door do I open? Which one's the right room? And the right room for me has always been that listening to your inner voice, listening to the guidance. And for so long, I was told that voice was wrong, and which is why I didn't share about my addiction and my recovery, because I was told it's shameful, it's embarrassing, people aren't going to like you. And so I kept it really quiet. But I found that once I stepped in that space of just honoring that and saying, like, this is who I am. And if this person doesn't like me, then this is my person over here. But that's really hard, and it takes that practice of like chipping away, right? Like one thing at a time and slowly doing that. And so I think, I don't know, like the tools for me when I first got sober, was really important to like, and people say like, what do I do at the holidays? And it was like, I don't, do you guys do this too? Like, I'd always have a drink in my hand, and it was always sparkling water or Diet Coke or something like that, where people were never asking me like, can I fill your drink up, or can I get this, or, you know, things like that. And also what I realized is most people are thinking about themselves a lot of the time. You know, they're not thinking about me, and they're not worried about me leaving, or they're not worried about what I'm doing, but they are worried about how it's going to impact them, you know? And so what I had to realize was that I'm the only one, you know, I need to worry about me and my emotional well-being. And so if I'm in the wrong room, I just need to step out.
Those boundaries. I mean, I'm when you started talking about boundaries, I just went to Darren because I feel like I have so much
Yeah.
much more empathy and compassion towards his practice of setting boundaries. It's got to be so fucking confusing, and like, you know, where you set the boundary and which family members. I mean, I can't even imagine like how much time, like, an energy that must consume some people, especially when it is family or it's someone that we've known for 20 years and we feel obligated to like still give that person our time or energy, but we have like nothing in common with that person anymore. So yeah, Darren, I don't know. I don't really have a question, but I just like, you know, I can't even imagine what that work looks like for you.
Yeah, no, it's a lot. And I'm just sitting here kind of thinking more towards the root. And it's like, you know, I've been somebody that is, you know, kind of like you, Hilary. I've people pleaser, really struggle with self-esteem so much. We had a guest on the show, our guy Neil. He comedian, and in one of his stand-ups, he was talking about how if somebody gave him a trophy and like he described like his body and was like a trophy case, or like, and he looks inside of himself, and if somebody puts a trophy on that case and that shelving, like he described it as it would just slide down because he didn't even have the framework or the inner world to be able to support and hold up a comment. So I look at boundaries and I'm like, you have to be able to stand up for yourself, but if I don't feel that great about myself, how am I going to stand up for myself time in, time again, and stick to those things? Like, I'm going to succumb and be like, well, you know, maybe I should do this. Like, kind of like you said, like the things that we've been taught and conditioned to do. And it's like, that's where it struggles. That's where it gets hard for me. And it's still a constant practice of trying to figure that out, because there's more and more intimate relationships, being married, you know, trying to maintain friendships amidst work and projects and things that I have going on. And it's like, sometimes you just get so overwhelmed, I guess.
Yeah. And I think that goes to like, you know, figuring out what it is that we like what do I like and what have I been told, right? In that paradigm, you know, of like, I've been told that this is what you do, and, you know, you do this and you do that and you do that. And so the way I'm raising my son, I have a 6-year-old, and he's like, well, when I get older, I'm going to get married and have a baby. And I said, is that what you want to do? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, you're 6, you don't have to decide that. And if you don't want that, that's okay. And he's like, but no, you have to have grandkids. I'm like, but I don't. It's your life.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I think like we've been taught a certain way, like this is what you do. But if I don't know what I like, then how can I stand up for myself, you know? And something I recently heard, which I love, is in the self-sacrificing space, is we can stop lighting ourselves on fire to keep others warm.
Ooh.
Oops.
Yeah, man.
I mean, it's like, when I heard that, I was like, yes. Oh my gosh, yes. Like that doesn't have to be a thing anymore. I don't have to set myself on fire to keep others warm.
Right.
Powerful.
Yeah.
What's your lesson? Go ahead.
Oh, yes. I was just going to build off of that, because I hear that and I think of, you know, my past and dealing with, you know, relationships and just life. It's like, I feel like I'm leaning into codependency or self-sabotage, or like, or maybe like a combination of two in the middle. And it's like, you know, I need somebody else to feel good, to feel great in order for me to be okay. But if this thing gets too good for the standards or what I tell myself I deserve, I'm gonna blow this thing up. Like, I'm gonna tear this thing to the ground. And I'm just like, I don't know, and it's still there. It's still there. It still wants to eat at me. It still wants to show up in the workplace. It wants to show up in marriage. It wants to show up in relationships, and it's something I got to keep digging on. You know, I tell like the audience that's listening, I'm not hosting the show because I've reached this place where everything is figured out and I have no more problems. I got plenty of issues that I'm still trying to work through, while also kind of giving myself credit for the growth. But yeah, dealing with just the inner world is can be chaotic.
All right. And I think that goes to like just giving people, like, I love what you said, you know, that you don't have it all figured out and you're not perfect. And that goes to the grace of being able to give other people grace when they're going through something too, and space, you know. But to your point, it's like, that's where I think for me, like the challenge comes in is when, like, I've got my stuff, like I've got, you know what I mean? But I don't ever want to have somebody else carry my shit. Like I want to work on it myself before I can, you know, but there's that's hard. That inner stuff is hard. And it's for competitive athletes too. I find that it's really challenging because, right, you're taught to beat people harder, faster, stronger, whatever it takes.
Right.
But then, you know, it's kind of like a split. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. And I imagine like there's got to be a lot of things going on in your world. If I try to put myself in your shoes, back in the day when you were this competitive swimmer, also a woman, and I want to know, like, when you are a woman in that space, just a woman in general who wants to achieve and set high goals for herself, like when you were dealing with your issues, do you feel like you kind of had to stuff them away to like not show a sign of weakness, to show yourself as like a strong being in this world? Like, how do you go about dealing with that? Because as a man, I don't know, like I can listen, but I don't really know the struggles of a woman that's trying to set the bar high and achieve. Give the audience, I guess, a picture to that.
Yeah. So, you know, I think I was joyful and happy. And so I loved the competition and I loved being the best until, you know, it came to a place where I wasn't the best, meaning I was so good at all these things, a great swimmer, a great athlete. I was really happy. And then for me, I think and this goes back to like what we're talking about, like self-confidence, right? For me, I think it went back to like, I had a little bit of depression, probably undiagnosed depression, which is incredibly common, going through puberty, you know, all of the things that people do. But I was told like, just to, you know, ignore it and it'll go away. You know, it's just a phase. It'll just go. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to push harder because that's all I knew how to do was just work harder, push harder, you know, and it wasn't working. And so for me, my solution was like, okay, figure out figure out how to make this work with the limited knowledge that I have and the tools that I have. How do I be better? And so that's, you know, when I started finding drugs and alcohol, and it was like, okay, well, this makes me feel better. I'm not doing any better. Like my swimming is tanking. My grades are starting to slip, but at least I'm really good at something now, you know, like I'm good at not being bad, but like I'm good at the opposite. And so that gave me a sense of accomplishment because I think at the end of the day, we just want to be loved, appreciated, and seen, like everybody. And so for me, you know, I wasn't getting the accolades from swimming. So I surrounded myself with people that were looking to numb out and escape like I was. You know, and that's when we start changing, like people, places, and things, like everything started shifting and changing. And, you know, when I got sober, I had to do the same thing. I recently got a note today from someone and she was like, I struggle with relapse. Like, what do you do? Like, I just keep going back to treatment. I keep trying to get sober and how do you do that? And I was like, you know what? I had to change people's, places, and things. I did not go to the parties, you know, not go to the bar, get a whole new set of friends. And I think that's hard. And I also think, you know, like you were asking about what it's like as a woman in sports or women in competitive, I think it's also hard in my opinion, you know, there's this, just read this, I don't know if you guys have heard, Women That Run with the Wolves. Have you heard of this book?
I have not.
So it talks about the wild woman archetype, right? Because most women, like going to that paradigm, we're told like you shouldn't sweat, keep your feet on the floor, you don't curse, right? Like you have children and that's your job. And that's kind of like what we're told to do. And it's like, But what about the woman that doesn't want to shave her armpits and just be sweaty? So
Right.
there's something wrong with her. And it's like, no, she's okay too. And so I love this idea of, and it goes back to competitive sports, like that wild woman archetype, like just being able to be competitive, but then also being feminine and, being able to, I don't know, spit but then also being able to like put makeup on, like it's all okay, and I think that it's just, I think a big struggle is just allowing people not to be who they are, and accepting them. And that goes back to being in the room. Like if I don't like them, I don't have to be around them, but I can give them the space to just be themselves, and that's okay. And I can just back out, It's tough.
That's a lot of wisdom right there, Donnie. I know we lost you for a second, but I asked Hilary, what it was like being a woman as a competitor, as somebody that was trying to set the bar high and set standards for herself, and if it was tough for her to navigate that space of trying to be successful, but also like, do I have to stuff my feelings and my emotions away in order to keep going and put off this strong image, just trying to gain a little bit of a perspective for her and women in their own walks. So, and I thought she handled it amazing.